Hello, Happy New Year. I am sorry this is taking me a while to put up, so I'm going to be doing this and the next few ones totally unedited. I'm not going to go to iMovie and edit things I say out or be clever intercutting stills and things like that. I'm just going to talk directly to the camera, and I'm going to be talking about the George Harrison Apple Years CD box set. And this is the box set that came out in September of all of George Harrison's Apple albums, starting from Wonderwall Music, going up to Extra Texture, along with a bonus DVD. So, these were all newly remastered. There was a lot of nitpicking on some of the websites about All Things Must Pass being reissued again, and a lot of people saying it was the 2000 master. These have all been digitally remastered again, and in fact, I can honestly tell you that if you own All Things Must Pass, the 2000 edition, and you don't want to buy the whole box set, it's worth getting individually. It really is, because as far as the mastering job on these, especially on All Things Must Pass, I was never a fan of how brick-walled or limited the 2001 edition was, and George actually supervised that. That was one of the last things he did before he passed. But John Astley did the remastering on that one, and John Astley has done some amazing work with the Who catalog. But outside of the Who, check out a number of the ABBA remasters he has done. He tends to do quite a lot of limiting, peak limiting. Look all that up if you don't know what it is. But on this, these were all remastered by Paul Hicks, Gavin Larson, and somebody by the name of Reuben Cohen, and they were done at a place called Larson Mastering. I know Paul Hicks' name from the Beatles remasters. But just take a look at All Things Must Pass here. They went back to the original cover art, the original black and white photo, and you get kind of a simulated gatefold sleeve with this, and a miniature version of the All Things Must Pass poster with the lyrics on the other side. And the remastering just, the music, it really breathes. It's like, these were remastered with care. One of the things I've been saying about a lot of the things with the Beatles catalog, the 2009 stereo and mono CD remasters, the Paul McCartney remasters, the John Lennon 2010 remasters, as well as the mono vinyl editions that have just come out. Great care has been taken in these things. The good thing about the Apple Years box set is that not only is that finally Wonderwall music, the soundtrack to the film Wonderwall. If you've never seen the film Wonderwall, it's a trip. But I've always liked this album. I like them. This technically would be classified as George's first solo album. I've always liked the music on Wonderwall music. I like. George always used to frown upon the avant-garde, but when George allowed himself to be avant-garde, or as he called it, avant-garde clue, amazing things happened. The Indian stuff on here was great, but you know, I've always liked the song. What's it called here? Drilling a Home. If you ever heard Drilling a Home, it uses a Mellotron Dixieland backing track, the same that was heard on the unreleased edition of the Beatles' Flying. Now, electronic sound has made its debut on CD, finally. Electronic sound. And this is George on the short-lived Zapple label, which was an offshoot of Apple. And the great thing about it, it recreates the Zapple label, is that I never bothered to listen to this. I never bothered to pick it up. And I'm somebody that actually sat through two sides of John and Yoko's Two Virgins album, which I didn't like. You want to talk to me about Revolution 9. I think Revolution 9 is brilliant. Two versions, But Electronic Sound, I actually decided to play after I got the box set in the car. Just to see just as an experiment. And I actually started to laugh. I don't know if it was George's intention, but there was a humorous access. There was a humorous bit to it that I liked. I don't. Maybe George was being humorous with his. And if you own the remaster of Dark Horse, not Dark Horse, Living in the Material World. Again, a new remaster. And I like. Now we get into the controversial aspects of George's catalog, and I want to talk about these two albums primarily in a bit more in depth. 1974's Dark Horse, which you saw my vinyl copy, recreates the gatefold sleeve and recreates the inner sleeve and the custom vinyl label. All of these are adaptations of the British configurations of the label, so some of us in America are used to the American apples and things like that. Extra Texture, again, recreates a custom label. Extra Texture does not have the die cut the way the vinyl album did, but it does still recreate the inner sleeve with, oh no, not him again, George's sense of humor, and it does create the rough texture, if you take a look there, of the vinyl copy. Dark Horse was controversial at the time because George was trying to complete this while he was rehearsing for his first U.S. tour. George was the first Beatle to go on tour, and he toured America. And he toured America with Ravi Shankar, jazz saxophonist Tom Scott and his band, which was LA Express. And it was a big thing. The critics didn't like it, but if you hear the bootlegs, the audiences were actually digging. I normally don't like talking about this, but it was a shock to me with George when I found out about this. George getting involved in cocaine usage. So this was a period of what he called his naughty period. And during the process, he tried to rush complete the album. He lost his voice. And on tour, the 74 tour, that voice was sandpaper. And if you hear him singing from that period, he was really like this. Almost like Rod Stewart, basically. Having said that, a lot of people criticize Dark Horse because of that. I think Dark Horse has great songs on it. The most telling song is the title track, where his voice is completely shot. But he's getting through it. I like the songs on Dark Horse. I think it's despite what was happening with his voice, you can't deny tracks like Far East Man, which he wrote with Ron Wood. You can't deny tracks like the title song, Dark Horse. You can't deny So Sad. George was, I mean, if we're going to be talking about John Lennon stuff as diaries of who he was, this is probably more of an accurate diary of where George's head was at. Simply Shady talks about the naughtiness that was going on with the drinking and the drugging he was doing. So Sad is an actual depressing song about what happened to him and Patty and his romance situation, even though he started at the beginning stages with Olivia on this thing. So he was on the up and up there, but he was going through a tough time, a really tough patch on this with this album. And I think the music reflects that. And I think that even the songs where his voice is not too good or completely shot, it represents it accurately. At least he was honest enough to put it out there. So I think this is probably one of the more honest albums a solo Beatle ever put together. Extra Texture, if anybody's a fan of Fab 4 Free For All, the podcast Fab 4 Free For All, totally trashed this album. And my friend John Montagna and I, we had a discussion on this album as well via email. I like it. It's not one that I that I reach for all the time. And I know Fab Four Free For All, they wouldn't criticize the one-hit song off here, which was You, with the very spade effects on his voice. I love you. Yeah, you. I have a soft spot for the song You. If anybody watched the anniversary video I made for my wife, that's kind of my song for her because it reminds me of a great time when we first got married. The songs do plot along. The Answers at the End is a great song. It just needed to be shaved a bit on the editing side, maybe from 5 minutes down to 3.5 minutes. I think if there's one thing to be said about the album is that there's not really a lot of energetic songs on the album. They tend to plot along. They're lower they are ballads. They are slower. You could kind of maybe call it his bluesy album. Some people love it. Some people hate it. I don't hate it. Again, if we're going to be talking about diaries of where George was at and where his head was at, these songs actually reflect where his head was at. I think if there's one thing about George, unlike the other Beatles, and the podcast Fab Four Free For All has talked about this, we could take a solo Beatles album and basically say, oh, that song would be a good Beatles tune. That would have been a good Beatles tune. That would be a good Beatles tune. That definitely wouldn't be a good Beatles tune. That is definitely not a good Beatles tune. One of the good things they brought an example of is All You Beatards Know the Wildlife album. Can you imagine Paul turning up to a Beatles session saying, John George, here's one, goes like this. Bip bop bip bip boo, bip bop bip bop boo. Fab Four Free For All did a great thing on that, but that's true. George was the Beatle that got furthest away from the Beatles sound. Basically, after All Things Must Pass, it was further and further and further away from the Beatles sound, that by the time he got to Gone Troppo in 82, I believe, 82, 83 is when Gone Troppo came out. And that's an album that I have on vinyl, and I just don't care to own it any way. I'm not a fan of Gone Troppo, except for Dream Away, that song. He got furthest away. That's why when Cloud 9 came out in 1987, people were praising it being a return to form because it was his most Beatlesque solo album. But he was the Beatle that got furthest away from the Beatles sound. He was getting into jazz fusion with the Dark Horse album and Tom Scott. And Extra Texture is probably the furthest away at that point to the Beatles sound. Maybe that's why people don't like it that much. I mean, like I said, the songs do kind of drone along. And it can be a boring album, and I think some of the songs could benefit from editing. But I don't think it's a bad album. It's not a flawless album, but I tend to like it as just a diary of where George was at that time. So if you don't want to get the box set, I recommend to get them individually. They are available individually. But if you own the Dark Horse box set, this artwork goes great with the Dark Horse box set. That's my take on it. And this year in 2015, I'm going to be doing some other things as well. I'm going to be doing some just talking about subjects I like and I don't like as far as music. I may talk about some other artists I like as well and some other releases coming out. My son Harrison's calling me. I had to close the door because he's walking around with daddy's shoes and stomping. These are going to become just a diary of him as well. But I'm going to talk about some things as far as music, physical media, the rebirth of vinyl. But thank you very much for subscribing, and tell this to your friends, and I'm glad you guys are sticking with me. And I like the discussion that's happening on my pages here, so keep them coming, guys. Thank you all, and have a happy new year. Have a great day. Thank you.